Değerli konuklarımız, hepiniz hoş geldiniz. Arkas Sanat Merkezi olarak Elgiz Müzesi ile gerçekleştirdiğimiz işbirliğiyle Mart ayından bu yana koleksiyonlarımıza karşılıklı olarak ev sahipliği yapmaktayız. Mayıs'ta küratörlüğünde hazırlanan Arkas Koleksiyonu'nda Doğa, Bahçeler, Düşler sergisi 3 Mart'tan bu yana Elgiz Müzesi'nde sergilenmekte. Arkas Sanat Merkezi'nde ise 24 Mart'tan bu yana Türkiye'nin en önemli çağdaş sanat koleksiyonlarından biri olan Elgiz Koleksiyonu'ndan eserlerden derlenen ve Sayın Billur Tansel küratörlüğünde hazırlanan Mitler ve Hayaller sergisini sanatseverlerle buluşturmaktayız. Ülkemizden ve dünyadan çağdaş sanatın önemli temsilcilerinin yer aldığı bu seçkide dünyaca ünlü sanatçı Loris Cecchini'nin de eseri bulunmakta. Bugün Loris Cecchini aramızda. Kendisine ve eşi Cecchini'ye davetimizi kabul ederek İzmir'e geldikleri için teşekkürlerimizi sunuyorum. Az sonra sergi küratörü Sayın Billur Tansel, Loris Cecchini'ye sorularını yöneltecek. Sevgili Billur Hanım'a da bir kez daha İzmir'de bizlerle birlikte olduğu için teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Uluslararası sanatçıların şehrimizde ağırlanması çok önemli. İzmir aynı zamanda genç nesil sanatçılara da ev sahipliği yapan bir kent. Bu açıdan uluslararası sanatçıların şehrimizde konuk edilerek genç sanatçılarla bir araya gelmesi ve etkileşimde bulunması çok önemli. Bu etkinliğin gerçekleşmesinde vermiş oldukları destekten ötürü İzmir İtalya Konsolosluğu'na Sayın Konsolos Valerio Giorgio nezdinde teşekkürlerimi sunuyorum. Konuşmasını yapmak üzere Sayın Valerio Giorgio'yu kürsüye davet etmeden önce aramızda bulunan yabancı konuklarımız için konuşmamın İngilizce versiyonunda yapmak istiyorum izninizle. Dear guests, welcome to Arkas Art Center. As Arkas Art Center, we are in collaboration with Elgiz Museum for hosting our collections mutually. Nature Gardens and Fantasies in the Arkas Collection, curated by Jean-Luc Mayıs'ta, opened in Elgiz Museum on March 3rd. And as of March 24th, we have been hosting Myths and Dreams in the Elgiz collection, curated by Billur Tansel. As many of you already know, Elgiz collection is one of Turkey's most important contemporary art collections. This selection brings together important representatives of contemporary art from Turkey and abroad, including the work of world-famous artist Loris Cecchini. Today, Loris Cecchini and his wife, Jade Cecchini, is with us. I'd like to express my gratitude to them for accepting our invitation and coming to Izmir. In a short while, the curator of the exhibition, Billur Tansel, will pose her questions. I'd also like to thank her for being with us once again in Izmir. Izmir is a city that hosts a remarkable population of young artists. In this respect, it is very important to provide opportunities to bring together international artists with the young artists of Izmir. I'd like to express my gratitude to the Consulate of Italy in Izmir, in the presence of Mr. Consul Valerio Giorgio, for their support in the realization of this event. I now invite Mr. Giorgio to give his speech.
Thank you, Mujde. Dear guest, Mr. Loris Cecchini, Miss Jade Cecchini, I will use too difficult for me to pronounce the other family name, Miss Billur Tansel, thank you very much for inviting me today to open this talk. I don't want to say too many words, just want to thank Miss Sevda Elgiz that started with an idea of bringing two Italian contemporary artists in Izmir in the framework of the exhibition at the Arkas Center. So we talked a bit and then we decided it was time for Izmir to have two contemporary artists. It's also the first time for the Italian consulate to work in this field. We are also trying to change what we can offer as cultural activities and also to show what Italy is doing in the cultural sector. So I'm very happy that a contemporary artist worldwide known as Mr. Loris Cecchini is here today. I think also it will be very interesting as talk because Mr. Cecchini in his works studied a lot the nature. studied a lot of how nature is combined and what are, I think, the feelings that nature can give, and also the instruments and the materials that nature we can find in nature. Also in his work has used plenty of materials through the time. And all this content, very real with nature and material, goes to the theme of the exhibition, that is myths and dreams. So it goes really in a sector that is not based maybe on with the feet on the ground. So I think the discussion can be very, very interesting to see how something so real like the material used and then the myths can combine. So I just want to give the floor now to the moderator, Billur Tansel, and to Mr. Loris Cecchini. Thank you very much.
Here, I would like to thank, as also a representative of the Elgiz Museum, for this wonderful event, to the Arkas Center, to the director, Müjde Hanım, and of course to the Italian consul and Mr. Valerio Giorgio for their collaboration and support. We're delighted to be here with Loris Cecchini and in the framework of Myths and Dreams, our exhibition.
Please. So I would thank you the same. I don't repeat all these thanks. I'm so happy to be here. I've been in Turkey a couple of times before, but never in Izmir. So it's really a pleasure. As always, Turkish people is very gentle and with an exquisite presence. I mean, it's always a pleasure to be here. So,
well, I have to say that, of course, Lorris is from Milan. He works and lives there, and he's an important figure in the Italian and international art scene as a contemporary artist. Of course, he's come to prominence through his sculpture, installation, photography, and drawings. I would like to quote something that his gallery said. The work suggests a natural energy evoked by the recent bursting of bubbles, vibrations, emergences on the walls, cloud expansion, waves, cocoons, crystals, and germinations. And the work becomes less and less concentrated on a direct human presence, which is something present in Loris Cecchini's earlier works, but more focused on an indirect human presence. And of course, there's scientific research involved and natural processes. They are immediate references for Cecchini's works, we can say. I would like to thank Loris, of course, for being here with us tonight. Despite his very busy schedule all around the world, he's got all the exhibitions going on at the moment. And it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
So may I start with my first question? If you
Yes, I would like to
Please.
maybe we can show to the people a few images, just because I have many images to show you, just to explain the work. The work it's been developed in 25, almost 30 years. And it changed. So the work here in the exhibition, for example, the double soft door that you see in the other room, it's from 2000. And after 22 years, the work is really changed a lot. Just because I'm always curious, respect the materials. The console, Mr. Giorgio, was introducing my attitude with a lot of materials. This attitude is because probably my curiosity between the physical matters and our landscape, our technological landscape. In that sense, I'm going to introduce to you to the last exhibitions, just going quite fast because I have many images to show you. In the meanwhile, maybe, Billur, you should start with your questions.
Of course.
Okay. Let me start from...
Should I start asking you about the work that is here in the collection and as a
Sure.
part of the exhibition? It's called Stage Evidence, Soft Door 1. That was acquired by the collection, as Loris
Okay.
was saying, in year 2001. It was 1 year after it was produced. And 22 years later today, I would like to ask him how his work evolved since that day.
The work is changed because at the mid of the 90s, when I started to work like an artist, I was about between 25 and 27 years old. I studied painting, and I started to work with photography, but I was just in the middle of this transition between analogical and digital photography. So my interest respected this medium was exactly the change in between our perception of an image, respect the photography in the historical sense. And I start to work with a sort of overlayering multiple images and working on this idea of a paradox. I mean, the goal was to have a paradoxical image where a landscape was completely fake and the real people was moving inside this kind of landscape. In the meanwhile, just after 4 or 5 years, I start again to work with sculpture and the rubber pieces, all very normal objects, from windows to pianos, from my bike to entire offices, were replicated in this material, gray, because the gray is a neutral, is like a ghost, is like in the ancient painting, the gray figures were an abstraction just for the representation of sculpture, no? In that sense, this gray, without any kind of color, any kind of texture, gave me the possibility to stage a sort of ghost of reality where the structure, the internal structure of the object itself is lost. In that sense, these falling down objects are losing their weight, they're losing their status like real objects because they were shadows of the reality. In that sense, the metaphor was strictly related with an idea of simulacra that was really developed from philosophy during the 90s.
Baudrillard, yes.
And many of the exhibitions were based with those photographies, but not photography, and those large installations with those subreal objects. And then from that point, this kind of organic behavior of the matter, it became probably the main focus of all my work. In between, let's say in the 2000, I start to develop small private spaces like transparent caravans or sort of winter gardens for the plants. At the beginning of 2000, nature started to become another important subject in the sense of the organic developing of the internal structure of matter. And But all these kind of elements, how can I develop something, getting an artwork at the real end? I mean, an artwork, it's a sensible place. In that sense, myth and dreams, they are still subjects related to the artwork. The artwork has to be a tool that touch our sensibility. So we have to spend time in front of an artwork, of every time, contemporary, but also the historical artworks. No? And so nature and sculpture. How to develop a sense of the sculptures today. In that sense, the technology, I think technology is a part of our knowledge. And it's very important when it's mixed to the natural landscape. I mean, we have the perception of the reality, but also the knowledge, the tools of technology. And in that sense, our perception is strictly related with the time. If you think that today we are always looking the screens, and 20 years ago, the perception of a painting, of a painted surface, of a sculpture or a tile, I mean, every kind of material today has a different weight. Just because we are going on the surface and the digital realm, it's our surrounding, our environment. So our perception today probably is a mix between those things. The nature, the real nature and the real weight of the matter, and the ethereal weight of the image. In that sense, you are seeing a few installations, and the last works are made mainly in metals. I'm using stainless steel after 20 years where I use plastics, marble, glass, and I'm very happy because I'm back to Italy after 6 years in Berlin. And I'm so happy because Italy is so rich of artisans and people that are very able to realize the things. Because today the part, there is a deep part of my work that I do myself in the studio. You see here all those sculptures. And the modules, the stainless steel pieces are industrially produced because it's a huge work. But then I'm there, always there, installing the pieces and giving forms, making forms, like with the freedom of a plant in the space, with the idea of energy, like a dance of elements in the space. So in general, this relationship between nature, science, but also mathematics and engineering, to me are really a condensation of things, but I'm still there trying to produce at the real end a poetical element that the viewer should feel like a bridge in the sense of the mythical image. It should be a desert, it should be, a tree surrounded by another nature. So it's quite difficult to explain all these kind of things.
You did very well, I think. And if we go back to, of course, stage evidence, the work that is here, it refers to the theater world and the theatrical scene. How did your interest in the theater world come about?
Because when I was very young, my uncles were working, they are still working in theater. So when I was very young, I was quite often behind the scenes. And this situation behind, you know, when a show is going on and it's like a world that's becoming true, or it's the surprise of the narration of a story. So this idea of, I mean, the title, Stage Evidence, it's also because the reality was like a stage. It was like in the science fiction narratives, something that's been construct in an artificial way. So we are always surrounded by artifacts. And we have to know this, no? And today, I have to say that this word of environment, I mean, not environment, but I would say, no, I'm losing the word.
Surrounding,
No,
nature.
in the terms of the entertainment, it's always around us. So the sensibility that we have to take care to keep, no, because art needs sensibility, and in that sense, we have to be careful, don't mix too much with the idea of entertainment. This is my position.
I see. So how did you feel about your work being a part of this exhibition? And what does the theme mean to you, Myths and Dreams?
I feel very well because it's not only my work, but all the works together. I mean, when you visit the show, you feel many aesthetical positions, and then you start to build a story. So in that sense, the idea of the dream, what's a dream? A dream should be interpreted in many ways. And behind the dream, there are always mythical figures, no? When you go to the psychologist and ask you what's your dream yesterday night, probably the lecture is strictly related with the symbolic figures. In that sense, an exhibition produces symbolic figures, no? And the mix between them makes a narrative.
Thank you. And what about the ecological concerns and the need for self-regeneration? Do you think that your work relates to this theme in that sense also, according to Felix Guattari's suggestions of ecosophy and autopoiesis?
Quite difficult, huh? I should say, no, the ecology of the mind is the first, the first approach. The ecology of the mind. But I don't know. I never want to read inside the work a precise definition. You know, for that reason, I did many changes, always searching a sort of translation of myself in the subjects and the materials. And like a writer, like a singer, in that sense, you are always searching for your position in the world. And art and especially sculpture, especially image, give me the possibility to play with the things of the world. So the the force, the power of an artwork should be different between one and another one, for sure, because also it depends from your ability in the sense of the language. I mean, to develop language, it's really a difficult position, because you have to study all the time, you have to confront yourself with the history, and with your, also with your environment in terms of cultural environment. So this is one of the reasons why I think the artworks, the languages of the artists are changing during time. Otherwise, you have a formula. I mean, and the formulas, it should be called style or, no? The repetition of the same piece for an entire life, to me, it's terrible, because I can die for this. In that sense, I'm always really very curious, respect the tools, because I have projects. In the meanwhile, I found new tools. I have the possibility to have relationship with companies, industry, like a designer sometimes. But I don't want to have this position of designer, because I have more freedom. Design is another thing. Design, the good design is when you have objects around you that are beautiful and useful. An artwork is different because it's not useful. I mean, in the sense of the common use. But it's useful for our internal side, interior side, no? So, and this is the ecologic of the mind.
It's a nutrient for the,
yes,
for
absolutely.
the soul and for the mind also. But when you're talking about creating the language, it's not so easy, because also the viewer has to have a background to understand this language. That's another part of art. Yes.
This is true. I mean, like every other specific activity, art needs to be studied. In that sense, we have reference, historical reference, and we should read the language on the base of the past, but we have to think also to our time. In that sense, what's happening in our time? What's the perception of our time? And contemporary is still working on this from many point of views.
For example, Xavier Veillant has a say in that. He says he used to, this very well-known French artist, he says, I used to build my work with certain values imposed upon them. But then I realized that the viewer might not be as informed to get the message. So he started to build them devoid of meaning. He said, I will leave it now to the viewer, which I think is an interesting...
Yes, but this void is very important. I mean, to me, the aesthetical presence of my art has to be very strong. In that sense, your cultural luggage should read in many ways. I mean, these particles, all these fragmentation remind you microcosmos and macrocosmos in the same time. So the viewer should be fascinated in a way and taken in a dream, and trying to recognize something that should be a cellular composition or the shape of a coral, and or the growing of a rhizomatic plant. In that sense, there is a lot of space, and probably the artworks are working well when this space in between me and the artwork is filled from the viewer. no, with his own perception. In that sense, the artwork is a bridge to another world, another kind of imagination. I hate when people ask me if the meaning is defined in the word. I hate this idea of information. An artwork is not information. An artwork is a moment of formation of
I agree.
no? And this is very important. So the poetical, I don't care if the work it should be a simple hand drawing or a very complex material installation, but it doesn't. I don't care about this. It has to be a bridge to something else.
I agree. So, I think the magic in your works results from your curiosity in experimenting with different materials, but also the fact that you turn your objects of affection, which is objects that you use daily in your office, that you like living with, into artworks. Would you like to tell us the story about how the objects from your office end up as parts of your work? You started to talk about it earlier.
Exactly. No, especially between the 90s and the 2000s, the object was very important. To work with the status of the object was a very important subject in art. So I decided to use I call them affection objects, in the sense that a chair in the studio or books or maybe also the telephone should be the subject for an artwork. In that sense, you have to find a way to analyze again the status of the object. Today, those objects to me are completely fragmented. They became like a molecular aggregation of things. And in that sense, I love to think about my large installations like a sort of three-dimensional diagram. I love scientific diagrams. When you get a drawing from a scientific publication and you get off the words that give a specific meaning to the drawing. What remains? A drawing itself. So the drawing is still open in the sense of the meaning. And in the same way, all those connections, all those directions, this vectorial movement of the installations or these waves, for example, are giving an idea of forces, of energies. So the real subject is a sort of abstraction, for sure, but the real subject is this particular attitude that we have with a life that expressed with scientific principles, but we don't know them, So it's a very empirical approach.
But also, in a sense, with the scientific approach, you're close to it because you're experimenting with different materials, how they turn into other things, the metamorphosis, the transition. That's really an interesting...
Yes, you're right, because from the beginning, from the rubber pieces, for example, to see the change of status of the matter, between liquid, changing the density and then becoming solid, it's really like in chemistry. So you're there and you observe this kind of metamorphosis of the matter.
Also, you discovered their potentiality in a way.
Exactly. And the errors are very useful because you learn a lot of things from errors. But in the same way, you go probably thinking not only using the materials for a specific project, but thinking to matter in a different way. like a philosopher in a sense. So what's my reaction and what are the reactions of matter? I mean, you get on a fire and the wood is changing, the smell, and this is a chemical reaction. And art should transform it, this chemical, in a symbolic. I mean, losing this status of scientific observation to become another thing. So the materials, anyway, are always a fantastic translation. And to play with materials, to play with machines, because also today we have a lot of ways to treat the matter. For example, we can make a reproduction in marble, starting from scanning everything. But the final touch, I mean, if you see a marble that's carved from a robot in 5 axis, the quality, it's always poor. The quality, it's always made from a machine. So you need to retouch by hand every time. And that's what's happened in the studio. Quite often, we work with companies. I prepare a lot of things out from the studio, and then the assemblage, the finishing, the polishing, and I would say the 30% that the most important part of the work is done by hand in the studio.
But I love your approach to change, because I think everything changes in life, and but change itself, we can say. And if we don't go with this rhythm, then we risk to be left out of the system. So in that sense, I think it's wonderful to analyze this as a part of life and the biological changes and happenings
Exactly.
around us. And what about the physicality? What is the reading of spatiality in your works, and how is it interpreted? And the presence and absence is also a theme.
Presence and absence, I think they are always there. Yeah, I mean, you can look at a picture, a photo that's not a photo, and you see something, but you don't see other things. What it means? It means that also here, the small caravans, what's the presence and the absence? Is it an object or a space? Are you inside or outside? So this idea to see and to be seen. In that sense, the artist himself became the viewer. And this idea of transparent, mirrored, and optical solutions, it's always like to see in a tool, like I don't know, like a microscope or a telescope. So the materiality changed because the relationship changed. In that sense, if you put an object here, should be different than on a roof. And this kind of decision make the status of the object itself at the real end. And no, materials are always a nice game. I mean, I'm 53, but I'm still playing a lot, like a child.
That's nice. I think this is how it should be. And what about historicality and the artworks?
I grew up in Siena. That's a small town near Florence in Italy. It's a very ancient town, a medieval town with fantastic square in the form of a shell. And I grew up with ancient paintings and in an ancient environment. And I think it gave to me this metaphysical approach to art. I mean, again, ancient art, it's very physical, but in the same time, you lose something. So it became a sort of a metaphysical narration of the history. Because you don't have all the instruments like a specialist I mean, only the art historians have instruments to read exactly, maybe, let's say 75% of the meaning of an artwork, of an ancient artwork. In terms of direct relationship, I really love, and like an Italian artist, I have many opportunities to play my kind of forms, my kind of shapes inside or in relationship with ancient architecture. And the position has to be never strong. It has to be a very light dialogue between them. Between, I mean, my project and the existing architecture. For example, if you have a museum or a private institution completely full of frescoes, for sure the relationship between my idea of nature is going in a straight relationship with an idea of nature that's in art from 3,000 years. And I see a deep relationship between, for example, I don't know, many decorations in the frescoes, in the murals paintings, but also in the Baroque reliefs. I see many relationships because all the details of these historical decorations quite often come from an idea of a leaf, of a seed, of a growing plant. So my works are strictly related with these kind of things today, and it's always a very nice marriage. So. And this should happen here also because, I mean, all the Mediterranean countries are so rich of history. And it's fantastic when you see something of 3,000 years ago in dialogue with an artist of today. I mean, you see that something is different for sure, but it's our culture respect to the past.
That's also another question I had for you about nature and culture.
Yes, nature and culture. As I said before, nature is filtered by culture. So every time we have a different position in terms of, if you think the neurobiology of the plants today, is a very deep research. I mean, today we move from an idea that a tree that was the same value of a stone in the Middle Age, today this ladder is changed. I mean, the level of the internal value in the life cycle is changed. And today we are talking again about our relationship with trees. So there are many software to hear the sound of the trees. Can you imagine? And this goes again to this idea of mythical relationship. Because in the ancient communities, everywhere, nature was so strong in terms of spirituality and mythological presence. No? So maybe again we are touching the same.
We are.
Yeah.
I agree. And of course the conception of reality and representation, which also you touched upon, but would you like to add anything about it?
Sorry again,
The
because
concept of reality and representation.
Reality and representations are always two different things. So the representation it's always, it should be very strong in terms of language, because representation goes strictly with language. Reality, the language of reality is also so complicated. But I leave the reality to the journalists and to the scientists, because scientists they have a different approach. I mean, the mythical and the metaphysical part probably is not so important in science. You have to keep your goals and applying the same forms, the same formulas, and this is a kind of reality to me. The narration is the abstraction from reality is more important to me. But I'm still with my feet on the ground, you know.
Good to know. May we then say there's a certain musicality to your work?
For sure. For sure, because I love every kind of music, and when I think especially to the large installations of the modular pieces on the walls and growing, I mean the harmony that you need between your language and the space, your attitude and all those elements. I mean, the singular elements, you can put them on the floor and they are another shape. Then they grow up in a way. So they define, like a dance in the space, they define vectorials, connections. So music it's really near, in a sense. Is the same kind of abstraction. It's a sort of orchestra that you have when you make a sculpture, and you are the director of the orchestra, or maybe the dancer in between, because I'm still there. You know, it's like a sport. When you have 1,000 pieces to assemble together, I use my whole body, so the day after I'm completely destroyed, because it's like to make a strong gym. So this physicality is also quite funny to me.
I often read that you were talking about a poetic experience with your work, and a sense of, can we say that there's a sense of poetic justice, where the materials go on a journey with you, finding out about their own potentiality with your guidance?
Nice. I hope so. I hope so. And this poetical justice, I don't know, but I'm thinking that quite often I did some large pieces in relationship with the trees or with the ceilings. So, you know, this act to elevate the lo sguardo, the look.
Perspective, yes.
The perspective is like, from one side you are like a child, you have to move your head and seeing something like flying. And this fact that you lose the base, you lose the pedestal is nice, because your mental poetry start to fly. So I don't know, because this poetical justice should be readden in many ways.
I agree.
Yeah.
I just have two more questions, and then I will leave it up to the to our guests. Maybe they might also have questions. One of them is, how did the pandemic change your perspective, or did it change your perspective in general on life, and was it reflected onto your works?
Like an artist, I should say that artists are in general prepared to be separated from the world. So also talking with a lot of colleagues, I think we are prepared to be far from the, also from the life, from the people, because you need your time to see the things from a distance. In that sense, the pandemic gave us, to all of us, this opportunity to concentrate and to read books, to listen to the music alone without any noise. So it's been a very good moment to me. I was working a lot during the pandemic, and also because I was changed from just from 6 months, 5 months before, I changed my studio and the house. So with the family, we moved to this new place just a few months before the closing of everything. In that sense, we spent all the time in a new space, and it's been a very good experience.
Wonderful.
But in that sense, we are always pandemics.
Some of us, yes.
Yes.
And may I ask a last question? Would you have a dream project that you haven't had the chance to realize yet?
Yes, because when I grow up, I want to be. Before I was saying I want to be an architect, but today I want to be a gardener. So in that sense, I would like to make a dream is to build a very small house, like a sculpture, inside the rocks in Sardinia, on an island. So
I would suspect it would be different than Irvin Worm's house.
Yes, something similar. But because this idea of the private space, that's your own house, in the same time, it should be an artwork. It should be a sculpture. So with an aesthetical and metaphysical value. If you are able to keep the things together, it's a fantastic goal. It's really a nice goal.
I agree. Thank you so much for this wonderful chat.
Thank you.
We will take questions if they have any, but I want to say that afterwards we can just go together and see your work there on the spot if everyone wants to. Would anyone have questions for Lorris?
One there.
Yes.
I saw the exhibition today. Your work is marvelous and so effective.
It's me? No, it's the microphone over there.
Your work is so effective.
Thank you.
I think it's like playing game, but hard game.
Yes.
Because
It's a very serious game.
Strict game. But when you are talking about theater and playing games and poetic justice, I'm a bit more ambitious about that. Thank you.
Thank you. No, it's a very serious game. When you have the opportunity to grow like an artist, I'm being very lucky because, it's very hard from the beginning to have a language to be recognized when you are very young. And then probably you start to sell your work and you start to have different values. It's both critical and economical, from both point of views. And you still keep this tension between this serious game to be an artist, because you are ambitious in the better sense of the word. I mean, ambitious, trying to translate on yourself in a way. And in the same time, this necessity to invent a solution, a language, that should be so strong to be recognized from a lot of history behind you. So in that sense, it's a very serious game. And you are always there, probably in relationship with your colleagues, with the masters, trying to learn other things and trying to compare different positions. So.
I think about Baudelaire's theories when I see your work too. It's like simulation theory.
Good.
Thank you.
We have a question here. Arja. Okay.
Hello again. Actually, I have two questions, if I may. First of all, it's great to have you here for this
Thank
live conversation. And my first question is that you said these fragments of the obsolete objects, I'm talking about this stage evidence, and one part of the stage evidence comes from a table perhaps, and one part is from the windows. But do you think this new object, which combined with all these obsolete objects, have its own unique identity as like something new? And the second question is that, do you think the representation itself is overshadow the meaning it tries to convey? Thank you.
Thank you. No, I think the object it's always becoming something new. So also because it's not like the Duchampian attitude to take a chair and to put a chair in like a sculpture, you know. This was a replica. So in that sense, is an object that replicates. For that reason, I'm talking about ghosts of reality. And probably your second question is also related to this idea, what's reality in the meaning of the object itself. I mean, this is very philosophical, philosophical approach. To me, to look again to an object that you perfectly know because it's a door, it's a violin, it's a bike. But you go through the paradox of the new status. So this paradoxical identity change the cards in terms of meaning.
Please.
No, the fragmentation was related, this idea of, you know, the recent work, as you see, is a sort of spreading matter. So probably at the beginning it was a concentration of a mass from the walls, like the books, some objects like chairs or fire extinguishers, then arriving to this abstraction of the waves. So all those objects, you lose the border of them because they are completely fixed to the wall. So architecture is a part of the object itself, and the object it's a sort of memory behind the skin of the architecture, behind the surface. They are a sort of emotional point in the architecture. And this lost of the object itself because you don't see the borders. So many people think, but are you taking all the wall? No, it's a polyester resin object made like the boats that's fixed, and then it's camouflaged with architecture. Mm-hmm. In that sense, the relationship it's quite strong. In the same time, the other way, the molecules, the sculptures elements, like here, like in this moving, no, in the video screen. What kind of space we have here? It should be the same in the physical architecture. And my main goal is not to stay inside the screen, but to go out in the materiality. So for me, the fact that you should walk inside the sculpture is very important. Losing the center of the sculpture like an object. Probably the human being, the figure, is inside the sculpture today. At the beginning, I was working with photography, with transparent spaces, and then 10 years after, I start to build transparent spaces, like the bubbles from the buildings. It's like a surreal image that comes out from a building, like a giant soap bubble, very light with the presence of the building in this relationship. And also the dimension of the work is really related with architecture, because quite often the objects are not so tiny, but they are large installations. And you should walk in, you should have many point of views, like in a garden. Yes, sure.
What do you think about Gaudi's architecture in this point?
Gaudí is fantastic. We studied in the studio this way to turn up the shapes, to calculate the weights, no? When he was working to the Sagrada Familia, these amazing vertical structures are projected, working with sand on the other, in the other direction. So he did a lot of experimentation. And architecture is really interesting also for this. I mean, there are many architects, like from Gaudí to Buckminster Fuller to Zaha Hadid, that define an idea of our movement in the space. So our perception of time, our perception of cultural identity is really defined from architecture. So, and I think it's very important to keep the ancient architecture alive. And in Italy we have this problem of conservation. So a lot of money is going in conservation. But we need also to produce something new, because the young generation need to understand exactly the time where they live. Otherwise, it should be only, you know, if you walk only in restorated places, your perception of the reality is different. And I think it's quite important. I mean,
Any other questions?
thank you. Thank you.